Hi, this is a quick masterclass in vibrato for advanced violinists. And I had a friend who said, "Oh, I wish I had your vibrato," who inspired me to do this. So, first of all, I think you're an amazing violinist. I've never noticed a deficiency in your vibrato, but if it's something you want to work on, maybe some of these ideas will help you or some of our students. So, in grad school, I was told your vibrato is far too wide and too slow. You sound like a violist. And I had never heard that before. So the next 2 years were really about trying to make my vibrato more artistic and violinistic. And these are some of the exercises and ideas that I found most helpful. The first one in pedagogy class, it came up that I shared that when I was taught to play vibrato, I was taught that the variation in pitch should be a half step wide, and my teacher was like, "Oh my God, no, that's wrong." And the other students in the class too were appalled that I thought it was supposed to be that wide. They said that maybe the pitch should change by a quarter tone at most. So I really needed to work on making the motion narrower and the variation in pitch smaller. The basic siren exercise is one almost everybody learns. When they're first learning vibrato, you set the metronome to 60 and you play wee you, wee you, wee you. And then you play eighth notes at that speed and triplets and 16ths. And I still use that with my students when they're first learning vibrato. But I think if you have a slow, wide vibrato, that exercise isn't super helpful because it encourages you to play slow, and the slower you're playing, the easier it is to play wide vibrato. So the exercise I do now when I want to warm up my vibrato before performances is one, I think I got it from Simon Fisher Basics, but instead of using quarter notes or even rhythms, I play a dotted eighth note 16th, dotted eighth 16th. So it would sound maybe like this. And then after I've done that, I add 2 little wobbles in pitch. So it's wee, wee, da da dee, like this. And I focus on keeping that change in pitch really small and the motion small and tight. And after I've done 2 wobbles, I might do 3 wobbles and then a long note. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then I probably just try and play consistent, fast vibrato. And I'll do that on all 4 fingers. That's my favorite vibrato exercise. Then, if you find yourself like you try and play a 3-octave scale with fast vibrato and you are completely exhausted when you finish, I think there's a good chance you're making the vibrato too wide. Because if you're keeping the width big and trying to go fast and cover that same amount of distance, you are going to be exhausted afterward. So again, focus on making it small. The smaller the motion, the easier it's going to be for you to go faster. Next idea is one that came from reading Leopold Mozart's treatise on violin playing. Leopold Mozart was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's father. And he said that in general, lower notes sound best with a slower, wider vibrato, and higher notes sound best with a narrower, faster vibrato. So that's something to think about when you're on the G string, that maybe you're using a slower vibrato and a little wider, and on the E string, tighter, faster vibrato. The next idea that goes along a little bit with that is that we know as we get into higher positions, the notes get closer and closer together. So you need to be careful. If you're using the same vibrato in 9th position that you did in 1st position, it's going to sound like the same motion. You're going to get a huge, much wider variation in pitch, and you're going to sound like the old soprano in the church choir. like with a super wobbly vibrato. So as you go up the fingerboard, you got to make that motion smaller and smaller to sound tasteful. Next idea is consistency. I got a lot of criticism from teachers in high school that my vibrato wasn't consistent. You need to be more consistent. And I'll get to that in a second. The one thing I want to say about it is some people kind of play with the idea that vibrato is something they turn on and it just stays the same all the time. And that isn't a very artistic use of vibrato. Your vibrato, you should be able to vary the speed of it and the width of it to fit the music that's happening in the moment. You need to think of it as a artistic tool, like in your painter's palette, that allows you to create different colors in the music. So if the music is more relaxed in a moment, you might use a wider, slower vibrato, and when it's more intense, you might use a more intense vibrato. So just practicing with that idea that you can change the speed and width when you need to fit your artistic desire. So back to the idea of consistency, though. I know why my teachers used to say that, and it was because I did what our former conductor used to call dead soldiers. He would say, "No dead soldiers." And what he meant was, if you're playing a phrase with vibrato, in the middle of the phrase, you shouldn't have a note that has no vibrato, and then go back to vibrato, because that note's going to stick out and not sound very musical. So that was a problem for me. I know when I was younger, because I had the idea in my head that I couldn't fathom how I could change pitches and like put a finger on the fingerboard while still keeping the vibrato motion going. I was convinced that the intonation would be ruined. Like, how can I hit the target if I'm wiggling my hand as I'm aiming for that like new target? So the exercise that helped me overcome that fear, I think it came from Viva Vibrato, that book. But the idea is you pick a note and play it, and then you drop the next finger on the fingerboard ridiculously slowly, or you pick it up ridiculously slowly while you continue to vibrate through. So it's going to sound terrible because your finger is going to bounce off the string a little bit for a moment there, and you might get a harmonic, but you will get the idea that, oh, I can put a finger down and keep the motion going at the same time. I'll play this here. It's probably going to sound terrible. So you do that enough times, and you'll overcome that idea that I can't, that you really can't keep the vibrato going even while you're changing fingers. And some violinists, Simon Fisher talks about background vibrato, where they can play really fast runs of notes and keep vibrating through them. So it is possible. I probably don't do that often, but I think it can add something to the sound, and it's worth trying and working on. Gosh, I think that's all. I bet you probably already know some of those things, but maybe some of it could be helpful. Like I said, if not for you, then for our students. So thanks for listening.